I'm Katia Sochaczewska. I'm an immersive music producer and a researcher focused on spatial audio technology in terms of psychoacoustics and perception.
I'm Craig McNamara. I'm an audio technician here at York University, and I'm also a music producer and a mix engineer. I work in multi-genres, and I'm really excited to be involved in this project with Katia, doing some electronic immersive music.
And we're going to explore and do a little immersive electronic composition exercise into introducing immersive thinking into composition and also doing some immersive music production, all using Eclipsa audio workflow.
And I'm going to be talking about some of the compositional choices that were made to create electronic music that was more suitable and more interesting for an immersive audio production. Firstly, I'm going to take you through my Ableton session where I started the production, talk about some of the compositional choices and tools that I used before handing the stems over to Katia, who then set up an immersive workflow in ProTools.
And then we will talk a little bit about how the session is structured, how do you make the choices of setting certain elements into what audio elements, and how to then export your file into IAMF format, so Eclipsa file.
Hi, so this is our original session which was done in Ableton Live, which is a great tool for composing electronic music. The reason we chose Ableton is just a lot of my experience in producing electronic music is based using Ableton Live. Being a modular synth kind of user, I tend to use Ableton with a lot of the techniques I would use in modular synthesis, using sequence lanes to modulate multiple parameters, creating randomization on things like velocity, and using Euclidean generators and logic to create rhythmical patterns. So the idea behind the track was to create a piece of electronic music that would work in an immersive environment, and we wanted to make some choices that would benefit that. We also wanted to bring a lot of texture and high frequency content and clicks and pops and sounds that would work really well immersively. The main part of the track is built around a sequence here which we created in Alto. The sequence is a 5-step gate pattern with 3 triggers spaced out, and so it's like a polyrhythmic gate sequence. What's great then is I can separate the gate data and the note data and start working on a chord progression and then trigger that using the gates in the sequencer within Alto. So the idea behind this sound is we wanted to create moments of tension where the sound could be pulled out and stretched and panned right out into the 3D kind of environment, and then when the track drops you can then bring it back into more into the stereo field, but still keeping some of the atmosphere and reverb and delays out into the surround speakers. And then we kind of complemented this with a pad here. This was a great sound for panning around in the immersive field, and then we added a little high frequency top line to be utilized as an object which then could be panned around discreetly. We've got quite a simple driving bass line. This is something that just mirrors the fundamental of the chord progression, using a similar technique, deriving the gates from the synthesizer and then playing the notes in a MIDI clip in Ableton. So some of the main elements that we really wanted to concentrate on when it came to the spatialization would be like rhythmical elements and things that could pop and move and give your ears something to lock onto in that immersive space. But one of the important facts was we wanted to keep like the energy of the kick drum and certain elements like a clap quite central and in the stereo domain. Obviously your sub is going to the LFE, and the kick as well. A little bit of that was sent to the LFE, and then some of the kind of mid-range and low mids going to the left and right. We had some elements here, these click sounds, which were created with immersive production in mind. Obviously, I wanted to give Katia some material that could be moved around and just pop out at little different places and just keep that immersive feel interesting and something that you could grab onto. So yeah, there's lots of little Foley, micro elements there, and they work really well immersively. We've got some just simple sounds as well, just little claps and kind of a hat that's going to be like the anchor of the track. So these sounds work really well when you keep quite a bit of the energy of them in the stereo domain, yet you can push some of the sound out as well, and spread them a little bit so they're coming out of your left and right surround, maybe a little bit of hats and high frequencies up in the tops. That works really well. And some other elements would be the textures in the track. So textures work really well immersively. You can really push them out into all the speaker array or whatever format you're working in, and they can be a nice way to create a good bed of audio that feels like you're really sat inside that sound. These were some field recordings, some of it's from a train, one's just some noise from an old piano, so it's always nice to use sounds that you've collected over the years in your productions. And little sounds like this as well, this glitch sound here is quite interesting, because this was it's nice to have little choppy little sounds that can just appear out of nowhere, and then you can just place them. Like it could appear at the left surround, the right surround, maybe in one of the rears, and it's just another way to utilize that immersive workflow so that you can just have little surprises, and it keeps your brain listening and keeps the mind like, oh, what's that? That's, yeah, where's that coming from? And it kind of emphasizes that you are listening to an immersive production, and we're coming out of just the stereo field, which we're so used to listening to, especially with this kind of genre. So now I'm going to hand over to Katia. She's going to take you through the ProTools session and the immersive workflow that she created there to finish the track, do the mix, and spatialize all the elements. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go through some elements that we have in this composition and introduce all the elements that we will later explain how we position and what we expect to achieve through this positioning and some processing. So we have a bunch of ear candies that are very fun and to play with. So we have a lot of high frequency content that is moving around, and then we have percussive elements, more classic ones, and hi-hats and all of that stuff. And then we have the classic kick and bass, which is forming the foundation of the piece. And then also some melodic elements and pads. And some textural elements. So all of them were created already thinking about the space and how they can be distributed and how to capitalize on some psychoacoustics that we are going to mention. But let's try to see how we made the decisions, how to structure the session and the piece. So as you will see, most of these elements will go through some processing and bus processing. And from that bus processing, like here with the drums, it will go to 714. And 714 is one of the main elements that we will use in this session. Another important one, the stereo element, which you can see here, the red output. And so here you can see the kick and the bass is going to the stereo. And then we also have one element that I created more for a purpose of showcasing this, and doesn't necessarily needs to be of this format, but this is an ambisonic element. So we're going to talk about all the different formats that you can currently use in Eclipsa, but definitely you can create different channel-based and ambisonic-based outputs depending on your needs in a session. So I'm currently using one 714 element, one stereo element, and one ambisonic element. Additionally, I also have a track on with the renderer on it. And so we're going to go through all of those pieces of the mix. So with the 714 element, most of the tracks are going to be channel-based. So here you define what type of audio element you're using. And you are able to do all your classic processing, which is very useful. So I'm doing some smiley face and some limiting on this bus. Next, I would like to have a classic stereo foundation. So in this case, a kick drum and a bass mag is going to be stereo, classic stereo track. And again, here you define this type of your audio element. And finally, this one ambisonic element that we're incorporating is going to be using the second order ambisonic. Well, the first order, it should be as high order as you can if you synthesize the sound source, but since we're just showing this example, I'm just using second order. And finally, in the Eclipsa audio renderer, you are able to create your mix presentation, which in my case contains the ambisonic element, and this one is going to be binauralized. 714, which also is going to be binauralized, and the stereo, which is not going to be binauralized. So with the playback, you will hear the classic stereo, and we're going to test that in a minute, why this is a good idea in case of some tracks. So going back to the kick, if we solo kick, and now if we go to the renderer and I will binauralize the kick, you will notice that you're losing a little bit of the impact of the kick, and also introduce the room, which is maybe not exactly what you want in the low frequency content and the content with the transients and the content that you expect to have that stereophonic impact. So same with the bass. So if I solo the bass now and do the same thing and then binauralize it, you're not really gaining much. So we will leave that as a pure stereo. But all the other elements, especially the the ones that we call ear candies. We definitely want them to be binauralized, and there's a lot of movement that we implement in them. So we want to preserve that within the playback on headphones. And so with the Eclipsa plugins, you have the possibility of preserving the movement within the ProTools or any other DAW that you're using. So if you go to the elements and see that panning controls are turned off, you're using pass-through mode, which means all the movements that you're implementing in your tracks. So for instance, just here, so the internal automation is going to be translated into the plugin. But you can also use the panning built in. So I will show you on the example of that little ambisonic element that I created. So actually, here I'm activating the panning controls, and the output mode includes now panning mode within the renderer. And you can see that I am automating some simple movement. And from this track, you can see that within the automation, I was able to record Eclipsa plugin audio element Axis X in this case. So you have complete freedom with preserving your workflow, or you can mix and match the techniques if you need something specific from Eclipsa plugins that they offer, like for instance ambisonics. So this is more or less the walkthrough of all the elements that we've got, and the types of elements, and with some justification on how are we using them in one context. So most of the stereo production techniques can be preserved in immersive production. So for instance, all the dependencies between the tracks. So if you want to create a sidechain, you do it in exactly the same way. So here I'm using sidechain with kick and bass, which are on the stereo track, but they could be also in higher format. So just using classic sidechaining with a bass with the kick, and all the bass processing, as I already mentioned. So on the drums, I have some FX chain that all the drum elements are going through, and then it are being outputted to 714. And those are multi-mono instances, but of course you can also use the multi-channel effects. So here I'm using some multi-channel reverb on the 714 track, and I'm sending some specific channels. I think this is the example. So I'm automating some immersive reverb. So this production on the compositional stage, and then on the mixing and production stage as well, is very much driven by psychoacoustics. So we benefit from knowing about the directional bands, which I'm going to put the link to below. So knowing which frequencies, enhancing which frequencies will help you create the sound source appearing up above you or behind you, because these are the directions that we really struggle with perceiving. So knowing these, you can really help with creating that sense of desired direction. And then another thing that I like to do is to create a contrast, and whatever that contrast means, whether it's frequency, so contrasting the low end with high end, and then making the low end static and moving the high end. So that helps your brain understand that there is a movement, because the moment you start moving everything around, your brain stops perceiving it. So anchoring one sensors while moving the other is usually a good technique to keep the brain reminding that, okay, we're moving stuff here. And then creating the width, and not only moving your sensors as a point source, but if you have a stereo track, like here, the pads, for instance, you can play with the width. So I'm using Spanner. I'm using the width and automating the width of the stereo, but there will be an example where I also use some automation. Yeah, like here. So you can see I'm automating the left and right channel and creating movement, but the distance between left and right is changing, so the width is changing, so you can try to like surround the listener within the sound and create that movement a little bit more dimensional, and automate your reverbs and your delays also to create more depth and more interesting movement. So these are probably some tips that I would recommend to explore in your production, and then we can move to the export when we're ready with the mix. And so finally, the export, if you want to create your Eclipsa file, you go to Renderer, and within the Export tab, you have all the parameters that you can define. So you choose the format, you choose the codec, and you choose the export audio and the destination. And everything's pretty self-explanatory. If you want to mix your audio with your video, for instance for YouTube, you define the destination of your video file, and when you go to bounce in ProTools, you just select your source, as here in my case it's a physical output, and it will create your IAMF file and your mux video with audio. So that is very simple, and the same way in all the DAWs, so regardless whether you're using Pro Tools or any other DAW. And so I hope this helps, and I hope that will encourage you to try some immersive production yourself. And thanks for watching.